Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most dashing work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're here, right on time.
Yes. Sorry, this episode is so late, everyone. And the one before it was quite late too. They're both my bad. But before we dive in, we should just say 11.1 came out essentially on the 1 year anniversary of Pale.
Hey!
So we've been doing this for a year now.
It's been a good year, Elliot. Good times.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see where the story goes from here.
Yeah, I feel like since this is the 1 year anniversary of the show, we should have something major to announce. But we don't, so...
No. I don't know. Maybe we'll whip something up by the time Pace rolls around this week.
Yeah. Yep.
Was that too subtle?
Was that too subtle? In case you missed it, we do have a big announcement. We were lying, but we're not making it here. We're making it over on Pace's final episode. So go listen to that instead. In addition to this, not instead of this. Anyway, let's
stop the episode. It's all downhill from here.
Let's get into Dash to Pieces. New arc 11. We're in Verona's head. Verona and her mum chit-chat as they head on over to Jasmine's house.
Yeah, and to start on a positive note, Verona fucking with her mum here is just very fun. Like, she does this thing that it's like, it feels to me like the closest thing a practitioner can do to sarcasm, which is just to tell such a wild version of the truth that's kind of so overly honest that innocents are just like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't get this joke.
Yeah, it's fun. Just having a good time fucking with people who assume that you're lying. I mean, Verona feels like she should be sarcastic, and so...
Yeah, exactly.
Telling the truth is just like a great subversion.
Well, yeah, this is the closest you can get. Like, it's the only way you can fuck with people in the same way.
Yeah. Verona prods her mum on custody a bit here, and Sylvia, as we learn she is called, continues to not really have any good answers. But she also doesn't directly answer any questions. I think it if you will, it puts me in mind of a practitioner avoiding directly answering some stuff. So the theory's well and truly alive.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, okay. I'm gonna have to
You can't deny it. There's another one coming up that I think is even more compelling.
Yeah,
I think
no, I saw that. Okay,
it's a legit theory.
Well, let's wait till we get there before we discuss this anymore. Then, but yeah, no, I once again find myself just kind of relating to Sylvia's frame of mind here in a way that I feel like this is a bad habit I have. So hopefully she's realizing it's a very bad habit she has. But this sort of she was sort of like, oh, things are really bad right now. So what I'm going to do is I'll just get my life settled. And once I'm settled, it'll be easier to handle Verona and I'll do a better job of that. And then it's sort of by the time everything else starts to get settled, you turn back around and you've already completely fucked up Verona. And then of course her decision then was like, oh, I'll just keep my distance. That's good for her, which
it's obviously a clear failing.
Yeah, but again, you can just see how at each step of the way there can be logic which would make her think this was an acceptable decision.
Yes.
It's definitely, luckily, I haven't had to do it with anything near this serious, but it's a path I've seen myself walk down with less serious stuff way too many times.
Yeah, definitely. I can see it. It is it's understandable if it falls apart a bit in hindsight.
Which I think for me doesn't, I'm not trying to say that makes it better, but it's kind of like understanding how it happens is the step to making sure it doesn't again, right? So that
and it's good that she's kind of recognizing it for sure.
Exactly. Like for me, this is the sort of thing where you call it out and you're supposed to be like, yeah, I get how that happened, and now let's learn not to abandon your daughter again, please.
Yeah, good strategy. There's this very fun moment where her mum abandons her daughter and says, I'm going to hit the road then. I'll be in touch. And Verona's response is, CAS mandated, with finger guns, which is just classic.
Although it does remind me of, remember when they got the brownie food right off, early Arc 8? I think it was 8.2. And Verona was making all these Bristow jokes about the food.
Yeah, definitely same vibes.
Yeah, like hiding her emotions behind goofs, basically. Um, like with this line in particular, it kind of feels like she wants to remind her mum that her mum legally, well, essentially legally has to call her,
Yes.
but she doesn't want to sound like whiny and needy
Yeah.
because her dad's taught her that that's bad.
Yeah,
So
she wants to bond with her mum without looking like she wants to bond with her mum,
yeah,
which is kind of horrifying.
yeah, she doesn't want to appear desperate because her dad's fucked her up that way. So she's just like dressing it up in finger guns, which I mean, I get finger guns are cool. So yeah.
Mm,
And I mean, Verona's mum does decide to stay, so the finger guns might have contributed. You can't prove they didn't.
mm,
Um,
mm.
so yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. Verona's mum continues to do the minimum amount of effort to be not the worst.
Yeah. At finger gun point, but I think it works.
Nice. Um, yeah. No, I think like Verona does a lot here to kind of challenge her mum as well. Like we should probably call that out. Like all this stuff with her in the car being like, hey, why did dad agree to this? Like tell me what I mean. Like
Mm,
she's just compared to where we were at the start of 10.4, she's much more willing to kind of communicate with her mum about this serious stuff, which is like the this has been the big problem for the two of them, is neither of them was ever willing to bite the bullet and bring up hard topics, so they just didn't talk. And Verona's finally sort of, gotten over that hurdle.
yeah. Yeah.
But just something else Verona does keep reminding us is that this is temporary. She's sort of thinking on
Yes.
that as she gets to Lucy's place.
Yeah.
Um, and like this is something I'm super interested to sort of
To see
track
what
as this
happens.
yeah
Yeah.
as the story goes on because like it
Like, are we gonna see? I kind of half expect that the end of the story is going to be okay. Verona goes off and stays with her mum for a while, and that's kind of where, we get a 2 months later epilogue or something when they come back to when Verona comes back together to visit everyone or something. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I don't feel like we're going to see the group fractured to this extent.
It's just like the way that we got like a deadline of her being able to stay at Jazz's until like the end of the summer. It's just another one of these end of the summer deadlines, and it's just felt a bit too clean to me in that one regard. So like I don't feel like the
Yeah.
story is done. Like Pale has been tackling hard issues a lot, so like it wouldn't surprise me if like the story didn't just shoo away the result that happens after
Mm,
this,
mm,
whether it's handling it in an epilogue or whatever, like I don't know, but like the way it comes up here makes me think that maybe before the culprits are caught or whatever, it'll become a factor that she has to consider somehow.
yeah. 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 I don't know. I don't know. I guess you're right. I think it would be kind of narratively interesting to see what happens if we do get to the point where we have to see the Kennedys really deal with this problem. But I also kind of don't know that we will.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know.
it absolutely could go either way. I would be interested to sort of see it because like it feels like a weapon that could be in the arsenal of someone like Marissa.
Mm,
Um, if Marissa,
mm,
had ways to fix Verona's home situation, that's going to
it's a bargaining chip for sure.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, Verona, Lucy, and Avery regroup and head to check on the furs.
Yeah, and I love how Verona feels really bad about ditching Jasmine. Because it's like Lucy's actually having to talk her into running away to do magic. It's bananas. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's this weird mix of like on the one hand, it's really heartwarming because it's like a sign of how much she
Mm,
values and appreciates what Jazz is doing for her. But then on the other hand, it's kind of like it feels like a remnant from her dad that her instinct on how to show appreciation and make herself useful is do all the chores.
mm, yeah. It's that's her only way to bond with a parental figure. Um, yeah, it's nice. Their relationship is nice. It's I wonder if having just a nice stable parent figure for 2 weeks will be enough to to start breaking through some of these barriers.
Oh, not if she's got this is just temporary hanging over her
Yeah,
head.
true.
Yeah.
Um, do you think them checking on the furs is a good idea? I kind of worry that they're accidentally going to give away the location of the furs by overly checking on them. And, obviously they check that they're not being spied on. And over the course of these chapters, they catch people spying on them a number of times. But I don't think that would be necessarily impossible to get around, right? I don't know. Somebody could get around. Maybe Melissa could get around this kind of spying detection as a aware, or yeah, I don't know.
Well, Melissa's a good example because that sort of touches on what I was going to bring up, which is like it's not so much that they need to be observed when they do the thing, but it's kind of like
Yeah,
people tracking them can do triangulation because it's sort of like if
yeah,
they figure out like every time we lose track of them in this very small area, like that narrows down the search area, right? And that's the sort of thing we've seen used in this story a number of times is people like I think it was Zed with the Hungry Choir. There was like talk of how he didn't look at the pattern, he looked at the missing parts. Oh, it was Ray. It was Ray when he figured out some stuff about Zed. It was because he looked at what Zed wasn't writing down.
mm,
Um, and yeah, like so, it just feels like that's a vulnerability. They lay the false trails or whatever. Like they have versions of their stink float off and
mm,
stuff, which might help.
yeah,
But
yeah,
you're right. If they're going there too often, my worry is that the others can connect the dots and narrow down where they need to search.
yeah. I think it's probably not the hardest thing to figure out. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
not in the least because the street that is hidden is called Half Street, which is just very silly, and I really appreciate it.
City magic is so cool.
It is cool, isn't it? God, the more city magic we see, the more I'm like, you know what? This is the type of practitioner I would be, because being a city mage just seems so like practical and useful and great.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it seems to rely on you having a good relationship with the place.
Yeah.
Um, so like assuming the place isn't toxic and shitty, it's like a
Mm,
pretty good form of practice, right? Like
yeah. I
it,
think it's especially a good form of practice for a practitioner who just kind of wants to lead a normal life, but also be a practitioner, which is definitely what I would want to do.
yeah, like it's the sort of thing I could see Lucy ending up doing a lot of. She hasn't so far, like she's dabbled compared to the other two, but like more than the others, she always felt like somebody who wanted to have a home or something, and it just seems
Mm,
like the sort of thing. Yeah, even though mostly it seems to be Avery's domain.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, to jump back like a little bit, um, it, you brought up how many times they find themselves being watched in these two chapters. I just want to
Mm,
shout that out, like how great it is at establishing like tension and the feeling of paranoia that the Kenneteers like have. Um, because it's just like every time these like alarms go off and they're sort of looking around, it's like, oh, I see a cigarette in the distance. Is that Sig? Is he watching us? Or there's like a goblin who will just suddenly be like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? I gotta run." And it's like,
yeah.
shit, are they spying on us or was this just a coincidence? Like, there's
It
this.
seems very. I mean, it can't just be a coincidence, right?
Oh, at least one of them gives the impression it could be. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's that sort of thing where like with some of these, you could write them off as a kind of like, oh, we just ran into that other. Um,
Mm,
Like it's some of that stuff we've touched on with Lucy in the past about like the looks that you get.
mm,
Um, but like yeah, overall, like just the fact that these alarms are constantly going off and they're constantly checking them, it sets this great sort of like you never fully relax in these chapters because you know that people keep watching them.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, legit. Like, they catch people watching them so many times, and you can only assume there's more that aren't caught, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because they don't have the things out every time.
Mm, yeah. Um, so yeah, the group plans to bind Edith, realizing that they can get the support of a judge to assist.
Yeah, and this is obviously like this is a big section of the chapter here.
Mm,
Um, I just want to like first point out I thought it was really interesting because the conversation starts to go a bit in circles, and like the first time I read it, I was definitely like, "This conversation's all over the place. It's going in circles," and then I think it's Verona who just sort of calls out, "Hey, we're going in circles," and I was like, "Okay, good. So this isn't like this is intentional by Wildbow. like he specifically wrote it to feel like it was a bit rambly and
mm,
going in circles. And it like,
mm,
then you start to think like, why did he do this? And like, I guess it's just because it's sort of like, I think the gravity and complexity of what they're up against is sort of really hitting the Kenneteers again.
Yeah, as it should.
Because like parts of this really read like a Reddit thread where there's like, Lucy's like, but what if John is secretly bad? Then somebody else will be like, yeah, or maybe Kennett's against us. And it's like, that's exactly the sort of dumb shit you see
Yeah.
in every thread, is like everyone assuming at some point that somebody is being the opposite of truthful.
I mean, but that's the kind of paranoia that you have to have in this situation, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Like everyone's always saying that, and I'm almost never like, oh, that's definitely not it. There's always a little part of me that has to go like, I mean, honestly, that could happen. Well, I
Mm,
don't think it will, but it could.
mm,
Is
yeah.
John bad? Might be the one that I'm like, no, I refuse to accept this.
Yeah, I also can't accept it. They put together their trio of helpers in a moment, and I mean, I'm just gonna jump to this now. We see it's Tash, John, and Guillerme, right?
Hmm.
And I am 100% sure that one of them is going to turn out to be bad. And obviously, the one I think it is Guillerme. But if it's either of the other two, I'm going to fucking lose my shit.
Yeah, no, same. Um, Also, I just want to call out quickly before we dive into all the tinfoiling proper.
Mm,
Um, so obviously they have their meat cube here, which again, it's
yes.
just a funny. It's just a giant cube of red meat.
Yeah.
Um, so did they tell Miss and Rook that they have the furs? Do we not know if they did, or
I don't know.
because like this kind of sort of came up in my head just because they obviously bring the sable into play here, and I very much get the impression that they have not told the sable they have the furs.
Mm,
Wait, especially with all the shit with John and the sable, I feel like John would be wearing the furs right now if they told the sable. Um,
mm,
so yeah, like I guess I'm just wondering, like, so there was this hypocrisy for like, oh, let's call in the sable, but we're not going to tell him about the furs.
mm.
And then I'm thinking, did they tell Miss and Rook? Like they've kept this very close to their chest.
They
Um,
must have. They surely. Nope. I've changed my mind. I don't actually can't say one way or the other.
well, yeah, because surely Miss and Rook would have had some sort of reaction or response to that. Like,
Yeah, for certain.
yeah. So
I don't know.
it's just crazy that they're keeping it this close to the chest, I think. Like, surely
Mm.
Miss needs to know.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see.
Um, but yeah, so to get into the proper tinfoiling here, the Kenneteers bring up something I think we talked about last week, which is just like, it's weird how not scared the baddies seem to be.
Mm,
Like, they've lost the furs. Lucy brings up they've lost Yolda.
mm.
And obviously, we saw in 10.z, Marisica still very definitively claims that they're going to win. Like, how?
Yeah, very confidently.
Which, like, I suppose we've seen Alexander fuck that up. Um,
True.
but yeah, like, I don't understand how she thinks that anyway. Like that's she's she must have some sort of ace up her sleeve, and I just can't picture what ace up your sleeve you could have that could compete with the fact that the Kenneteers took Yolda away and now have the furs.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff goes exactly as Marisica predicts that it's going to. So it's not like they're
Yeah.
being caught out here.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, is like one of the few things the Kenneteers hold on to is this idea that they've got the element of surprise. And it's like, oh, we're gonna go like cause drama and ruin the other side. And it's like, but we saw in 10.z, that's not what they're doing. Marisica is ready for this to happen. Like this,
Mm.
even this is not disrupting Marisica's plans yet. Maybe the Sable being involved will.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, maybe that's enough of a differentiating factor, but I don't
but,
know.
but yeah,
It seems like Marisica kind of expected this exact thing to happen, right?
yeah, like she's planned for Edith getting caught. So it's just like we're still at this position where it's like we haven't rattled her at all, and I'm just what
Elliot, what if the
what
twist is that Guillerme and Marisica are working together? Could that be it?
I mean,
It would kind of make sense, right?
I guess I mean what, because they're both fairy.
No, sorry. Them working together doesn't necessarily make sense, but it would answer a few lingering weird questions about, like, you know, things about Mariska being so confident, things about Guillermo feeling like he's gonna betray the team. Like, I don't know.
I'd have to go and read because Marusika and Edith talked about Guillermo and 10.z.
Mm,
I'm not remembering any specific lines that jump out to me as disproving this theory,
mm, mm,
but I feel like that would have come up if they just started talking about their co-conspirator. I don't know. Unless
mm,
Edith doesn't know. Who knows? Who knows with this shit? I, it's crazy to me that there isn't somebody who's figured this out yet. I'm so used to being in fandoms for stories, something like Mr. Robot, right? Gets figured out 2 episodes in.
mm,
There was that one really big prediction in Ward that kind of nailed a big twist in Ward very early on.
mm,
Um, and I'm just amazed that I've never seen it's such a testament to the I don't know what's called, the mystery box or whatever that Wildbow set up, that even after all this time, I've still never read a theory that's made me go, yeah, that feels like it. That's
mm.
that's the whole story, or that's a big chunk of it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I don't necessarily think anyone has fully pegged it.
No, whereas that Ward one, or a lot of other TV shows or films where big twists have been predicted. When I read it, there's always this sort of sense of, oh yeah, I think this person's got most of the gist.
Mm,
I've never had that reading a Pale one, and maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe somebody did get it 8 arcs ago, but it doesn't feel like it, and that's crazy.
yeah, 100%. Um, so I want to touch on something that is called out by actually Avery. Oh, that's right. Who mentions that all three of the people who took us on the camping trip were dodgy with info when it came to Yolda being a sick dog and not just a black dog. So those three people are Edith, Matthew, and Charles, right?
Yeah,
And this to me is maybe the strongest point that I've heard to implicate Matthew, in the sense that he could have corrected misinformation and would have noticed it. Like, he seems like he would know the difference. And the fact that he hasn't corrected it or didn't correct it at the time, I don't know. It just feels significant.
I'm going to challenge the idea that he would know the difference, because
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Charles is the one who called her the sick dog.
Mm.
And that was knowing others was his speciality. We saw in 10.z, Matthew took the girl by candlelight. So it's kind of if I was sitting next to someone with a PhD in molecular biology and they used a term I didn't think was quite right, I
Mm.
probably wouldn't challenge it, because I'm going to be well, they're the one with the PhD in molecular biology, it's a
Mm.
molecular biology term. I'm going to
Yeah,
assume
true.
yeah, I think, yeah, Charles should know this stuff much, much better than Matt. So it's reasonable to me that even if Matt noticed it was slightly off, he probably would have just been well, Charles knows better than me.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, actually. All right. You're free, Matthew. You've been validated, vindicated.
Yeah, that said, I am starting to lose hope on my idea that I've been holding on to since the start of the story, that Charles doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Um, it's feeling more and more likely that he's been forced into it, just because he's so easy to force into it.
Yeah. Poor bastard.
Um, and I've just been holding out hope that that isn't the case. But it's with every day where those other pieces don't connect, I can't help but be oh, I think he was.
Mm. Yeah. We'll have to see. I mean, we'll never know. We won't. We just can't pick it at this point, right? It's impossible to really know.
Yeah,
Um, but I kind of agree. I feel like he, you know, we got those flashbacks with Edith's backstory, and he just seemed like such a nice dude. Like,
yeah. But
I
I
find it
mean,
hard to believe he's a fully willing participant.
yeah, I would tend to agree. Although that said, his current situation would make anyone understandably bitter towards someone like the Carmine Beast, who would not even listen to his appeal.
Yeah.
Um, which again, that was a motive that was brought up in Arc 1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then at the same time, I mean, Marisica being an evil genius was brought up in Arc 1, and that's just turned out to be a fairly accurate description of where she's at. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
speaking of the judges and not doing things, that's something Lucy brings up a number of times in this talk. Is just so what do the judges do?
Mm.
And then there's this bit where I think it's Avery, but it might be Verona, who sort of says, "Oh, well, they they do things like fight against others who are threatening the seal of Solomon, or monsters who are too big for any one person to defeat, or
Mm.
like breaches between worlds and stuff like that." And as she was reading out that list, I was just sitting there thinking, "Don't all three of those kind of describe Kennet right now? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What?" Like Kennet is in some ways a direct attack on the Seal of Solomon.
Mm.
Monsters too big for any one person to defeat is probably the most arguable, but breaches between worlds. I feel like the only thing I can say with a remote shred of confidence about Maricica's plan or Edith's plan is that it seems to involve Kennet becoming a knotted place to some degree,
Mm.
um, at least temporarily. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I can't wait to see more of the Sable in practice, just because I still very much on Lucy's team of like I don't understand what these guys do. Like I understand what they're meant to do, but I don't understand what they do. What they don't seem to actually do.
Yes. I, I hope that we are going to get, I think we're going to get more answers to that over the course of this little, set of chapters, right?
Yeah, it feels like it.
Over the course of this arc. I think Sable is going to have to step in at least somewhat. And that will give us an opportunity to see what it actually means to
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
judge.
exactly. We get
Yeah.
a glimpse of it in the end of 11.2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am just excited to kind of learn more about just why do they do things like ever? It's
Mm,
useless.
mm. Yeah, we'll see. So the question that the trio keeps coming back to, and I think we should come back to as well, is the question of motive, right? We have the means, we know it was the Hungry Choir, we have the kind of opportunity, we learnt about Edith kind of abandoning her body at some point during the night, right? Like, we know this stuff. We
Yeah.
don't really know why Edith, or I guess Mariska, is doing this. Any thoughts, Elliot?
I mean, like again, this feels like the thing we were just talking about, where it's like I've never seen anyone talk about why Edith and Marissa would be doing this. That makes me feel like, you've nailed it. You've
Yeah,
pierced the veil.
yeah.
Um, like there's some stuff like after Edith's interlude, I feel like she could be doing it like for Matt, because there was that whole angle she had where she didn't just want to feel Matt and be inside of him or something, but it was more about she wanted to feed his desire and like specifically help him achieve in that way. So there's like some weird thing where, when he gave her a body and gave her the stability she was missing, is this all some convoluted way for her to give him the throne, the Carmine throne, so she can like give him like a purpose and aspirations, like because
Mm.
her whole thing was that he didn't have desire or like a mission.
Okay, I can kind of see it. It doesn't feel quite right. I feel like
No,
it needs a
right?
bit more.
Yeah.
It needs one more final twist to really land in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel like the whole thing. It's just the closest I can
Mm,
come to some sort of big brain idea
mm.
for it. Yeah, and then obviously with Marissa, like fuck knows what she's thinking. Um, the only idea I have is that it's the same one we've been talking about since Arc 5, which is that like since she's a younger fairy, uh, she's probably more likely to be radical and making like big plays that try to disrupt the status quo, because the status quo is shit, and she's younger, so she's more inclined to like rage against the machine.
Mm, mm. Hmm.
I mean, what about you? Like, do you have any extra thoughts to add on?
I don't. I've got a prediction that a community member has left in our Power Predictor app that I'll touch on later, which I think kind of might explain, or again, like your one with Edith, kind of partially explain Mariska's motives.
Oh, okay.
But not holistically, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, oh god. I'm just imagining like the end of an arc, like be like 11.z, and it'll just be this Marissa interlude that'll just like blow our fucking brains out.
I can't wait for it.
Um, Actually, also something else that comes up here is the Kennedys briefly mention Melissa. I think Lucy sort of says, "Yeah, the
Mm.
witch hunter was a bit of a wake up call for Melissa." And it got me thinking, where is Melissa?
Hiding under her bed. and
I mean,
that's it.
fair. I don't know. Just we're going to talk about the witch hunters more at the end of the extra materials, I imagine. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, that just feels like a related thread that is still dangling somewhere. Like Walbo's so good at this, he has fucking 100 little puppet strings laid out, and he can pull on one of them whenever he wants. So it's like just another one to watch out for it coming back in.
Yeah, definitely. Keep an eye out for her hobbling back into the story.
One last quick thing from this section before we move on. There's one point where uh, Verona's describing what would happen to John if somebody else got the furs or whatever, and Snowdrop decorates her description by saying that he would get splattered. What do you
Mm,
reckon is the opposite of splat?
inflated.
Oh, so like blown up.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I was thinking squished,
Oh, yeah.
but is that kind of the same? I don't know. Hold on, I'm googling splat antonym.
Productive use of time. Uh, um,
Splash.
great.
Oh, no, that's the definition. Antonym. Oh, what? The antonym of splat that I'm getting on synonym.com is val.
Well, you can't trust synonym.com to tell you about antonyms. Obviously, they've got skin in the game.
They're working against the big antonym. Or would it be
um,
small antonym?
so, Avery and Snow head off, and Lucy and Verona have a chance to catch up further.
Yes, and I mean, I feel like the big thing we need to talk about as Lucy and Verona have their chat here is obviously just how Verona has come back, and he's just so good at caring for the other two now, right? Like
Mm,
more than like she's often talked about how these are the only two people she cares about, and fuck, you really feel it in this week's content.
mm, yeah. She does good. She does the exact right amount of grief giving to Lucy, right? Lucy owns
Yeah.
up to her kind of failure, and Verona gives her the exact right amount of understanding, but also, you know, nudging, aggressive nudging, let's call it.
Um, yeah, well, especially because like Verona's thing here is very much, hey, if shit's getting to you, open up, like talk to us. Don't just take it all on your own shoulders. Um,
Mm,
which is like sort of beautifully hypocritical as well as just nailing this bad habit Lucy has of taking responsibility all on her own shoulders. Um,
mm,
yeah, I can't help but keep thinking that it's like Verona is just operating as such good proof of how getting help works because she got help and now she's helping everyone else like 100 times better than she used to.
mm. Yeah, she's really knocking it out of the park now that her home situation has been fixed forever.
Yeah, temporarily.
Um, so yeah, they return home and they get permission to invite over Avery, and the group continues to enjoy each other's company ahead of the trials that they will have tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's this nice moment of like it really feels like this is the three of them sort of getting to spend their last calm time together before tomorrow is fucking like
Mm,
it.
yeah, it really feels like a calm before the storm kind of moment. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing you can really feel in this part to me is the rift in the group. Like, and we'll
Mm,
touch on this when we get into Lucy and Avery's kind of reconciliation next chapter. And maybe it's not a rift per se, but like Avery feels so off at the moment. She feels kind of really subdued in a really strong way. And I hadn't really felt it this chapter, but after I read the next chapter and then came
yeah.
back and did my second read through of this one, you do really feel it. Like, I don't know. Maybe we'll chat about it a bit more next chapter as well. But it just feels very. She just feels not quite there in a very tangible way.
No, absolutely. I was the same as you. I got like a little bit of a vibe from it at this end of the chapter, but I was just like, oh, she's just still recovering from her head or whatever. But next chapter definitely sort of sits you down. It's like there's something wrong with Avery.
Mm,
And we'll talk about it at length in next chapter, I'm sure.
mm,
Um, but like, yeah, you're right. Like, there's just stuff like in this bed scene. Like Lucy's going to use this puzzle metaphor next chapter, And we see in this chapter, there's like all three of them try to sort of hug on the bed, and it just doesn't work. And then Avery has to go sleep in the cot by herself. And like Lucy and Verona sort of move apart a bit, like which it's hot as balls because it's summer,
Mm,
so I get it, but like it's intentional imagery, I think.
mm,
That like as we sort of this is our first chapter of the arc. It's sort of this is the chapter that's establishing the vibe and the themes for the the arc, and it's sort of like ending on this note of these three aren't quite fitting together right now, despite Verona's best efforts.
mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, so I don't know when to talk about this, so I'm just going to shove it in now. Um,
Okay.
there's like been a number of moments in these like last couple of weeks of chapters where like I've been tempted to use the term personality bleed because it feels like sometimes it feels like the Kenneteers are picking up the traits of each other, and this was something a lot of people talked about in Arc One, were theories around the Kenneteers will be able to swap personality traits or something because of their connection because they awoke together, um, and that idea sort of fell into the background. Um, and I guess it's interesting now because, like, reflecting on it, it never felt right to me in Arc One, and I feel like I can better convey that now because it does feel like we see it a little bit here in Arc 10, but it's almost like it doesn't need to be magical to me. Like, that's just how friendship works. Is like if you're hanging around someone all the time and they have a trait you really admire, you're probably gonna try and pick it up a bit.
Mm.
So maybe it is partially magical. Maybe we'll learn there isn't a magical element to making it easier for them to do or something. But it's like again, that's just magic exaggerating the real world, which is what it does in the other verse.
Yeah. 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 I guess looking at it from that lens, you can kind of just describe it to like it's something that kind of happens in real life, but this is just a magical, exaggeration of it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what a lot of the other verse is. So it
Mm.
would track but even like honestly, I'd be willing to believe that it wasn't magical at all. If we get to the end of the story, it turns
Yeah.
out, that's not a thing. But well, yeah, like they're just friends. Of course, they picked up
Yeah. That's
quirks
just
from
how
each
it
other.
goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you spend a lot of time around someone. Um Well, that's Dash to Pieces 11.1, but never fear because we have another chapter to discuss here Dash to Pieces 11.2. Uh, we are in Avery's head now, and Avery goes with Lucy, Verona, Jasmine, and the newly named Sylvia to get some yum yum bagels.
Yeah. She finally earned that name. We talked about it. And it
Grats.
happened.
Um, so, if we're tracking the practitioner, Sylvia could be a practitioner thing. There's another point where Verona kind of pulls some practitioner double talk bullshit, and Sylvia immediately picks it. Uh, she is just a practitioner. It's just a fact.
I mean, she isn't the worst choice of the parents. Like, if you wanted me to make a list of which parent they should bring into this world if they needed to bring one in,
Mm,
Sylvia would probably be my first choice.
mm,
I think I suppose, in the same way Verona felt like a natural fit from the practice. Like, I guess, those of us coming from Pact, I think a lot of us read 1.1 and was sort of like, I think Verona will get this world. And the story has addressed that a lot. So it makes sense that Sylvia, someone she gets compared to a lot, would also kind of fit that bill.
mm, yeah. Mm, okay. Well, I have a stronger point of evidence coming up soon, but
Got another one?
yep. Let's litigate over this next. We're entering into the food argument corner, Elliot. So get your gloves ready. Um, fake meat. Fake meat doesn't get a good rep in this chapter, but I think fake meat can actually be quite nice. If you're in Sydney, in near Central, go to Shift Eatery. Delicious vegan kind of deli. Got a lot of vegan sandwiches in Surrey Hills. Beautiful. Or Brainwave Cafe, another one that I went to recently, basically all fake meat on the menu. It's delicious. It's good. It's good times. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some like fake meat things, and like some of those new impossible meat things are like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pretty damn close. Um,
Hungry Jack's, which is what we
yeah,
Australians call Burger King, is it?
HJs.
Yeah. Has a impossible Whopper. They call it
Yeah,
delicious. Fucking delicious. Great.
I,
Um,
I when that first came out, like as a test, me and a mate went and we each bought a Whopper and an Impossible Whopper.
Mm-hmm.
And like honestly, if I didn't know which is which, I don't know that I would have been able to tell you.
Yeah.
That said, this is probably just as much of a statement on the quality of Hungry Jack's beef as it is on the quality of the Impossible
Yes.
meat.
Yes.
But yeah, no, yeah, and like like friend of mine, or it might be a mutual friend actually, is now working for like one of those lab grown meat companies,
Mm.
and that's the sort of thing where in a couple of years, I reckon they'll start to
Oh
become
yeah,
like
it's already
really good.
starting to happen.
Yeah,
I eh, vegetarian fast food is a personal interest of mine as a vegetarian and somebody who loves fast food. So this is my jam. And actually, speaking of big announcements, we might. I'm gonna soft announce this now, Elliot. Just improv
oh,
announcement, I
finally,
guess.
yay!
Um, there's almost certainly no. There is going to be a series coming out pretty soon that I'm going to do, probably with my sister, who is a food journalist, where we go around and just eat vegetarian fast food, and review it and discuss it. That's still kind of forming, but that show is probably coming soon in about 2 months. So stay tuned, I guess, if you want more fake meat discussion.
I'm very excited for this. You've uh, tossed around ideas for it for a while, and I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yes, I agree. So yeah,
But now that we're
Avery,
done, oh, sorry.
bad opinions in this segment.
I mean, it depends on the fake meat.
It does, it does. And look,
Maybe
I
yeast inspection has
yeah,
bad fake
exactly.
meat.
I
Like,
was gonna say you don't trust food at a place called Yeast Inception. Yeah, I don't think that's a reflection on the meat though.
yeah. The other thing I wanted to call out really was just that Lucy's one of these people I see going on about bagels, and bagels is just bread. Like, I don't. Have you ever had a bagel and it wasn't just round bread?
I mean, it's like a savory donut, Elliot. I think
Yeah.
they're nice, but I really like bread, so I agree
Well,
with
no,
you.
yeah,
They,
no, sorry. I'm not saying they're bad. I like
yeah.
bread. I'm just saying I often see people like, yeah, Lucy specifically here highlights bagels, and it's like, I
Mm.
don't know. It's just bread.
Yeah, I mean, when we lived in America, I had some like New York style bagels,
Yeah,
and they were nice, but it's as nice as like a really nice sandwich, you know? So,
exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I'm just constantly putting this out there because I need somebody to finally make it click for me why people are so goddamn obsessed with bagels.
mm,
Um, actually, and back on the fake meat thing. Avery is openly vegetarian here, right? Which is like because I feel like the last time this came up, she wasn't explicit. Like she always said she wasn't vegetarian. It was just she wasn't eating meat right now.
mm,
Like, is this the first time she's just sort of accepting
she's
the proper
finally,
label of
yeah.
vegetarian?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I guess so.
It just I don't know. That feels like a step, like going from oh I just don't eat meat right now because of the wolf to just being a vegetarian. It's like she's
Mm,
actually
she's
mm,
leaning into it finally.
yeah, and committing to it, I guess, by accepting the label.
Mm, yeah.
Meanwhile, Verona's over here ordering a bagel with like double olives and red onion, like a fucking monster.
Um, yeah, it's a bit of a wonky choice, but
Uh,
Verona's Verona, you know?
yeah, I mean, Verona's taste has always been cursed, I suppose, when it comes to food.
Yeah. um, yeah, you're right. She's cursed.
Um, oh, and there's a moment where so Verona sort of snaps at her mum a little bit, and Lucy's mum then leans over to say something quietly to Verona's mum, and Avery sees like Lucy catch this and then frown and look at Verona, and like Avery's just kind of confused and packs it away because it's Avery, and I was like, I fucking hate this. Like, I want to be in Lucy's head when we have moments like this. I don't want to be confused. I want to be Snoopy. Like, what do you reckon they were talking about?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. The fact that the fact that Lucy overhears it obviously is very tantalizing, but I just don't. We're never going to know, Elliot. So don't let yourself fall down the trap of endlessly wondering about it.
It's too late.
Yeah.
Um, is it because I think the context is like Verona's mum starts really getting into talking to Avery, and maybe it's like Verona getting mad that her mum is talking to other people. Like, I
Mm,
think Verona wants time with her mum, and maybe it's Jazz being like, "Hey, fucking spend some time with your daughter."
mm,
I don't know.
yeah. I assume it's Jazz giving a bit of like prompting for Sylvia for sure.
Yeah. I really like Avery's like little speech here about how she likes sport because it's like she can be sort of the big fish in a small pond. Like she can just
Mm,
tune out the rest of the world and focus on conquering this small one.
mm.
Because it's just like it really sold to me why a sportsman would be a great fit for the paths. Like it's just she's just describing the paths. It was like, yeah, I want to tune the rest of the world out and just focus on
Yeah, you're
nailing this
right.
little one. It's like yeah, Miss
Yeah,
fucking nailed it.
yeah, you're right. It's a it's a great metaphor for a finder. Um, so this breakfast deteriorates as the Kellys come by, being their normal chaotic selves.
See, for me, this is a relief because Verona's mum and Avery's dad were starting to talk about stuff that was very similar to my own work, and that was
Mm.
triggering me a lot more than the Kellys. So I was very excited for us to get disrupted by the
To
Kellys.
get
I was,
interrupted.
I was like,
Yeah.
this story is meant to be my magical escape from the real world, and now you're laying my work in front of me. We need something to go wrong. And the Kellys delivered.
Yep. Thank gosh for the Kellys. Yeah. Confirmation that Sylvia has kept her maiden name here, which is fun.
Mm,
And here's some more compelling practitioner evidence. It's because, similar to how Lucy awoke as Lucille, and that was a whole big deal about changing her name. Sylvia probably awoke, awaked
yeah.
while she was married, and therefore, as a practitioner, they don't really grok the concept of her getting a divorce and changing her name, and therefore her name's still Hayward because she's a practitioner and she can't easily change her name. Is compelling evidence.
Oh, I hate that I can't refute it. I mean,
The evidence is starting to stack up, Elliot.
because Zed are right into the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's been established. This is
I
the 3 beat.
I mean, we did get confirmation from some Canadians in our Discord last week that it is a thing that you have to work to change your name after a divorce in Canada.
Especially if you're a
Yeah,
practitioner.
okay. I'm just saying, Sylvia's benign explanation for this does make sense, but it also totally aligns with everything you're saying as well. So, yeah. If she does turn out to have been a practitioner this whole time, I will just have to quit podcasting because you'll be so justifiably smug about the whole thing.
Mm, I
You
will
called
be.
it from fucking day one.
It's gonna be the case. So yeah, Avery does some snowdrop borrowing here and a bit later in the chapter as well. And it's fun to see Avery kind of making use of this familiar bargain. But
Yeah. Well, it's always really cool little abilities that she gets.
yes, very neat kind of stuff. But it's two problems I have with this. One, is Snowdrop like getting something out of this bargain? What does Snowdrop get out of this? And two, Avery uses the Snowdrop powers to one, eat some food, and two, pick a shirt. And I'm kind of like, eh, I guess if it's free, if there's no downside to them sharing power, then why not? But it just seems like these are very mundane little things to borrow on Snowdrop's power for. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree because something that the text very deliberately brings up every time Avery does this is that it like disturbs Snowdrop.
Yes, not
Um,
hurts her, but
no,
disturbs her.
yeah, which like just gives the impression that it's noticeably taking something from her.
Mm,
Even if it's not life threatening or anything, it's like yeah, I had the same worry. Because I think Snowdrop's promise in the familiar ritual was that like she said Avery could take whatever she wanted and she trusted her. Um, and so like Snowdrop isn't really in a position to do any more than ask that she doesn't do this.
mm,
Which I mean, it's Avery, so that'll actually be enough, I'm pretty sure. But these two have a history of not necessarily communicating changes in their circumstances to each other very well. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, it feels like something that will get resolved pretty easily between the two of them. They're always managed. They're both very smart and reasonable. It's just is it going to happen before one of them gets a bit burnt by it?
Mm.
Is the question.
Yeah, I don't trust that Snowdrop will be defensive enough of her boundaries on things like this. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, that said, like, not that I'm trying to justify anything Avery did here today, or if it needs justifying, but um, Avery did lend Snowdrop a bunch of herself in the days where she was like properly concussed and couldn't get out of bed, and that's part of
Mm.
why she was recovering slower. Um, so Snowdrop is getting stuff out of this too, and obviously she's getting her whole like she can dress smarter now, and she isn't aging super quick.
Mm.
So there are benefits to her, but like, yeah, I don't know. You're right. I got the same vibe where it just like every time Avery leans into this, it seems to pull on Snowdrop in a way that didn't feel good.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard for us to. I think again, it feels. We both kind of noticed this. I think. I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. Obviously, Avery is not in a great place at the moment as well. So it's
Yeah, it might just tie into that whole kerfuffle.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I guess. Um, Lucy and Avery reconnect. Lucy apologizes, and Avery accepts it. I guess too quickly, and yeah, we'll get into it. I guess. And then they walk down to get some healing from Tash.
Yeah, because Avery just gives her fucking nothing. Like
Yeah.
it,
Is this concussion related? Like,
Well, yeah, I didn't know you could be bad at accepting an apology when you're actually accepting it, but apparently you can.
yeah.
Um, I had the same thought actually. At first, like when I first read the chapter, I was writing a lot of this off as, oh, maybe she's just still post concussion Avery. But
Mm.
um, I caught it on my second read at the end of 11.1. She says Tashlit healed her head.
Hmm.
So unless that wasn't a complete fix,
I don't know.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I suppose, Avery obviously mentions briefly the idea that the doctors said she might never recover and maybe Tashlit couldn't fix it either. But,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I just started to really get the vibe from this chapter that Avery is regressing a bit and becoming that, like, it
Like
feels like she's
isolated
starting to,
from the world kind of
yeah, she's
deal.
starting to head in that dark place she was in just before the start of the story, before Miss Hardy
Mm.
saved her.
Mm.
Was almost the vibe I started to get. And then I
Mm.
started to think about like, you would have thought like Snowdrop would prevent that from happening just because she has Snowdrop in her life now. So like, what's
Yeah.
going on there?
I don't know.
Like, you think Snowdrop at the very least would notice and tell tell Verona and Lucy, and get, or is it that she
Yeah.
got a familiar and she still feels lonely sometimes? And I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. It's I don't have any answers on it.
You know, okay, something that hasn't come up in the story for a very long time, but I've always thought might come back.
Mm.
Avery doing the glamour check marks on herself.
Mm.
What if like Tashlit healing her brain or the injury itself or a myriad of other things has like caused that glamour to like break
Hmm.
and like
And that's kind of shattered her self-esteem because
yeah,
that's kind
because
of the foundation it's built on.
yeah, well, sort of the bounce back you can get from leaning into this stuff. Like we've seen it happen to Verona with some of the runes. Like,
Mm.
yeah, maybe it's some sort of form of withdrawal or something.
Yeah. 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 I could see that. Interesting. Interesting. I quite like that as well, especially if we're coming to a collision with a fairy, whether it be
Yeah,
Mercica or Guillemette. Maybe it's even something that's been kind of nudged along by one or the other.
yeah. And we already sort of talked about it here, but in her apology that gets terribly accepted, Lucy brings up this great metaphor for basically everything Pale is talking about, which is personality wise, I see us all as jagged, weird shaped things, and we try to mesh together as best we can. But sometimes the mesh isn't perfect and we bounce off one another or something, and that doesn't at all mean that I don't care or I'm not in your corner.
Mm.
And I feel like because this is, I mean, that's just like so much of what Pale has been talking about. Like,
Mm.
uh, I feel like we've talked about it a lot when it comes to the concepts of cooperation. We've said the story is often reminding us like people don't all have to be the same for us to work together. Like the Kenneteers work differently. They have different values. They respond differently to their emotions, and they don't have to like become the same in order to work together. They just have to become better at accommodating each other.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice, good paragraph to sum up what it's like to have a friendship that, you know, even if it's not necessarily always super easy, it's valuable to put in that effort.
yeah, because I don't think anyone meshes together completely.
Well, I
Like,
think after you're about 15, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
um,
Um, yeah. Hey, so when they're chatting to Tashlit, I just kind of noticed when we were in these chapters between Verona and Tashlit, like I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of well written from Wildbow, I guess, where the symbols that Tash was making felt so much more interpretable, whereas in this chapter, like it
yeah,
Tashlit is incomprehensible here. And we could spend ages trying to decipher it, but I still feel like I would have no idea. And I think it's just a really good like a thing that Wabo has. I don't know what it is, like the way he describes the gestures just makes
yeah.
them not click as much.
I feel like with Verona, when we see it from her head, there's just like the exact meaning of the shape and the way it's being moved is just described in this way that makes it easier for us to connect the dots as she does. I think she often connects the dots in her head as well, which helps. Whereas you're right, in Avery's head, we just get stuff like it's like she pointed at the ground. Whereas Verona, Verona's just better at like describing the key identifying features of the gesture to us. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I agree. It's just clever writing. I think is what it boils down to.
Yeah. I just kind of noticed that I was like, wow, I thought I could understand Tashlet sometimes, but I just can't in this chapter. And I was like, oh shit, because we've got no Verona. It's just so clever.
Yeah, you're seeing it from Avery's perspective
Yeah.
in a really cool way. Because yeah, there's that one gesture that Tash does where she's like, they're talking about like back in time
Yeah.
and like they sort of like, oh Tash, we don't get it, and Tash just waves them off, and I was like, oh, is this going to be important? This is going to be a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I noticed there's one where Avery thinks just something like Tashlet made some incomprehensible gesture
Yeah.
with her hands, and I was like, "Oh, "That's classic." Um, so yeah, the trio kind of regroup and head around recruiting backup for the fight. Tash accepts, as does John, and they then go off to refresh their protections for their family.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that Tashlet shows up in this chapter because we've just been talking about how Avery is being bad at accepting like apologies and like getting help, basically. It feels like Avery's falling into that trap again of not communicating her problems to people and just trying to fall under the radar. So I don't think it's an accident that Tashlet shows up again because Tashlet is constantly doing this same shit. Like they try to give her these new shirts and she like freaks out that she's getting new shirts that aren't like hand me downs. And it's like, come on, Tash, you're worth like, you know, a new top. Like, what are you talking about?
So you think that's the moral of having Tash here is just another demonstration of like um the downsides of refusing to accept help from people.
I think so, because like we took, like it was a theory I was holding on to in 10.4, right? That like Tashlit wasn't asking for help. And I started to get worried for Tashlit in 10.4, and I brought that into this chapter. And then the fact that I was suddenly feeling the same thing for Avery, I was like, oh, okay, I think this must be like I'm worried these two are heading in similar directions at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. I can see it. I can see the link, I suppose.
Also, Tashlit washes her hands a bunch. What's up with that?
My gut is instinct is just, you know, without her skin is obviously falling apart, so she's probably vulnerable to like infections if she can get infected as a other. Um, so
I
could
mean,
it
I
be something so mundane?
feel like she'd be washing more stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, true.
Maybe. I just like it was weird because she does it after healing them. I've noticed like whenever she uses her magic. I wonder if it's like
Mm,
I guess mild spoilers for Invincible, but it comes up 5 minutes into her introduction. There's the character Monster Girl in Invincible, and it's like every time she uses her power, she like de-ages a bit.
mm.
Like, what if every time Tashlet uses her powers, it pushes her away from humanity?
It contributes to her skin falling off,
Yeah,
etc. Yeah, I could see it. Pretty tragic. which means it's probably true. So we have this conversation with John, and I really like how John does not mince his words here.
Yeah.
This and the next chapter, the bonus material, are very useful to demonstrate, like, you know, there's been some fucked up shit lately. Blue Heron Institute, the Witch Hunter, and things are still escalating.
Yeah. And like, just as well, like the fact, like they ask John if there's anything they've overlooked, and they're clearly actually asking him, like, you know, for tactical combat advice regarding like the culprits and something. But he instead turns it into like you need to make sure the other people in your life are taken care of. Like, it's such a wholesome point that he brings up, even though it's a tragic and like hard one to bring up. But just to mention to them that the thing they're overlooking are the other people in their lives
Yeah.
is actually kind of heartwarming.
Well, yes, in a way that is, again, very reassuring that I don't think John is a culprit. Like,
Yeah.
he's just so considerate about some of these things.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that his response to what are we overlooking when it comes to this fight is taking care of the other people in your lives makes me think that he and the Sable's plan can't be that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully. Hopefully. So yeah, Avery has dinner with her family and then kind of gets her affairs in order in case she doesn't come home.
Well, her family gets dinner, but they don't get dessert. Avery and
Thanks to
Snowdrop sort
Avery
of
and
that.
Snow. Yeah.
Uh,
So what do you think
it's-
this reveal with their family is? My guess is like it's Grumble related. It kind of like
yeah.
the other one, which possibly could be important, is like the Kelly parents getting a divorce or splitting up. Could be it. Yeah, I don't know.
That would feel more out of nowhere than like Grumble being sick or something.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was a bit of in this chapter when they were at the bagel shop. We got a bit of Avery's mum kind of side eyeing Avery's dad because he got to hang out while she had to take the kids, which is a bit of a like not a problem, but I don't know, maybe starting to hint at
Yeah.
some simmering resentments.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. Yeah, I came away with the first instinct you did that it was like, yeah, Grumble related. Like, is he moving out? Or I remember way back, I want to say Arc 3, when we met Rowan's girlfriend Lauren in that music shop, and she was going on about like assisted suicide and stuff. So like, is that going to be fucking the biggest like long con foreshadowing of all time? Like, I don't
I
know.
hope not. Yeah, the fact that we don't find out what it is this chapter feels worrying. Like Avery is not processing it, which means it's probably going to come up at the worst possible time. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and especially because her own feelings around Grumble are such a fucking mess right now. Like she
Yeah,
talks about
yeah,
them in her letter in the next extra material. Like it's
yeah.
she loves him so much, but also just uh, with the fact that she doesn't know. Yeah, I don't know if he knows she's out yet or anything, but like the fact that all of our assumption is that he's going to react poorly, it is enough to just like make that messy as hell.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to know about it yet, right? Like it seems like she hasn't come out to him.
Yeah. So then there's like a bit like just after she has the dinner with her family where she meets up with Avery and Verona. So Verona and Lucy. And they start like prepping various bits and bobs. And Avery outlines like what her domain would look like. And she needs to get a domain if this is what it's gonna. It sounds cool as fuck if she can make that happen with like a fucking loft with hammocks and then just like doors to paths and shit. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the three of them have obviously not been super keen on domains, but domains are pretty cool. I'd love to see some cool domains.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you get rid of the culprits, it'll be easier to hopefully claim it. So maybe we'll see. I mean, obviously, the main part of this isn't actually the domain chat, but it's them. They start coming up with the contingencies to work against their allies.
Yeah,
Like it's
pretty
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They sort of have to be like, okay, now let's assume we're going to get betrayed. How do we combat
Yeah.
the people who are going to betray us? It's so necessary, but I hate it.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. But yeah.
Sorry. Because one contingency they also planned for is Marisica.
Yes.
And I wanted to point that out because we already talked about Marissa and Edith a bit earlier, and their plans, but like Mariska's whole thing in that part of 10.z is she's like, you need to sell yourself as the main culprit and make them think that like, we're not involved or whatever. But I feel like us and the Kenneteers were already like 99% convinced Mariska's involved before that. So how does that fit in? Like,
Like, why is Marissa so confident if everyone kind of knows?
yeah, like that's the thing. I think, yeah, we can. I feel like the Kenneteers can pretty safely say Marissa is involved. So it's just wild that so much has gone into basically having Edith take the fall when it feels like that wouldn't be the end of it. Like if they took Edith down, they're probably just going to turn right around and be like, okay, let's do the same shit for Marissa.
Yeah. And then, of course, this chapter ends with, time's up. The trio finish off their preparations and meet with the Sable Prince, who deputizes them, escorts them to arrest Edith. And Edith gives up when she sees who and what she is up against.
Yeah. I mean, something we should talk about as the Sable shows up. This chapter's done a really cool thing the whole way through with like time checks. Like Avery has been obsessively
counting
checking
down
the
effectively.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to just add tension to the chapter because we feel the tension ramping up slowly with every like hour that's lost, and Avery thinking, "Oh shit, it's coming." It's a great like framing device for the chapter to just constantly make things feel more and more hype as we get to the sort of main event.
Yeah, it's the tension builds for sure. So yeah, Guillemets here too. We don't see the recruitment scene because obviously there'll be some major clue in there of why he's a villain. But he's here for now, on side.
Yeah, I don't know. I still have hope for him.
Yeah, you know what? There is something coming up. Actually, I mean, it's effectively here where he repeats that phrase. He repeats, "I must teach you rhetoric, dear Lucy. It breaks my heart in small ways to see you be so blunt when you have such potential for grace." Which, in case you don't remember, is something that he explicitly said back in the scene when they were confronting the witch hunter, right?
Yeah, in 10.3, he says almost exactly the same thing, word for word.
Yes, which indicates he is already falling to winter, which indicates to me maybe he is not a villain. Maybe he's just a tragic, tragic friend.
Well, we were told they wouldn't like who he became when he fell.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, because he talks so florally, verbosely, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Could just be referring to he'll still be irritating and try
He'll
to
still be annoying as hell.
We also get a quick appearance here from Reggie, who I just want to call out because Reggie sort of shows up, gives them some knowledge from Rook. This is how they learn that Liz and Sig are on side with Edith. And I just loved this because I was like, oh, so Reggie did buy into Crooked Rook's bullshit. Although I guess we're good with that
now. We like it. Yeah.
That's okay now.
Yeah.
Turns out her
Yay.
bullshit was actually the good part of the bullshit she was spouting. And something we didn't mention here, the Kenneteers are fucking like warded man themselves up. They've covered themselves in like runes and shit. Like,
yep,
that's so cool.
It is very cool. It's pretty baller. That's one of the scenes you want to see in the in the Pale TV show or anime adaptation or whatever.
Like how visually it just sets you up for this feeling like it's going to be fucking huge. Like, there's so many parts of this chapter that just feel like they're selling how epic this is about to become.
Yeah, 100%.
This is part of it. Like,
yeah, it's good stuff. So Sable shows up, and can we talk about how the appearance of Sable is so like powerful? He takes a step, and you see the world described as kind of like being killed effectively. Like the world around him turns grey, and you feel this kind of like aura and gravitas as they walk through town, and around them the world is shutting down. It's just so cool. It's baller.
Yeah, just another example of how hype this all becomes. Yeah, like you're right. It's just this whole walk. They're just slowly walking. Everything's shutting down, and you're just like, I know I've said it a billion times, but like the way that the other verse is literally able to lean into having like the atmosphere be a tangible thing, like getting to do stuff like having the Sable's effect being clearing the path and having the town shut down is just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Avery has this great moment where she calls Edith like on the way over to declare their intent. And there's this great moment where Edith says, "I know what you're doing. This won't be as easy as you're picturing." And Avery just says, "Okay," and hangs up. And it's just like, as concerned as I have been about Avery's one-word responses to everything all chapter, this was a good one. Just the way she just gives Edith nothing is already starting to establish that actually, so far this has been even easier than they pictured by a long shot.
Yeah. It this goes so smoothly.
So far.
There's so much build up, and the build up even continues in the bonus material, right? And then it's just so, in air quotes, easy. Like, she gives in. Like, again, this is kind of exactly what Marissa wanted to happen, right? It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, the easier Edith just gets packed away as the main culprit,
Yeah, I guess the better
things
that
are
is.
looking for Marcy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, for me, like, this moment just really sells how much it felt like a judge was able to grease the wheels. Like, he just made this feel so effortless. And he talks about that. And again, it just comes back to the, why the fuck aren't you guys doing stuff more often then? Problem.
Well, yeah, I think the other thing that it really makes me think of is like, if this is what a judge represents, okay, I get why someone would want to take the furs and become the Carmine role, right?
Yeah.
If this is the power that you have access to. Like, we're seeing the demonstration of it here.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where the chapter ends, with Edith being taken into custody to be questioned. And we're back with a bonus material, Elliot.
Yeah.
11.2's extra material, the just in case extra material.
Sorry, before we get into the extra material, just one last thought about Marissa and Guilherme. So sorry, I just remember, like, again, so in 10.z, Marissa was so sure she was gonna win. Like, she says to Edith, "We'll win," like, very definitively. We've actually chatted a bit about this on Facebook, just between the two of us, but it's like, in a few chapters before that, Guilherme actually said he's never sure he's going to win, because he essentially says that being sure you're going to win is a surefire way to end up heading to winter, because you take the story out of it by being on top all the time. So, is that something?
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Is
Marissa gonna go to winter somehow as a result of this?
I mean, Guilherme somehow dragging her down with him would be hilarious. But yeah, I don't know. Like, is this just, is this sort of the first chink in her armor? I suppose that it's like, she has this supreme confidence she's going to win, and it's like, well, if that is actually the case, then you either go to winter or you're just wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, maybe this is part of some, motive for what the Fae are up to.
Yeah, or maybe it doesn't apply, because it's like, I suppose this has been a 10-year plan, right? So it's like, we're in the last 1% of the plan. Maybe it's sort of like, like, chess is still a fun game to play. If you're unsure, you got to win like halfway through. But then when you get to the point where you've got all the pieces and they've just got their king, that's still. Does that analogy make sense?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Like, just there's a difference between knowing you're going to win when you're about to checkmate someone versus knowing you're going to win going into it.
Starting the battle. Yeah. I getcha. And now we get to our first bonus material in a while. These just in case heartbreak letters. Starting with Avery, who writes a note as a form of explanation for her family if she disappears or dies, and also leaves one for Mrs. Hardy.
Yeah, these are just an attack.
Yeah,
they're just. It's no other way to say it. Walbo is just attacking us.
It's horrifying, isn't it? Yeah, and the worst fucking part about this chapter is it's impossible for us to know if this is here just to like keep raising the stakes, as we mentioned before, or if it's doing that, but also kind of seeding ideas from Wildbow about how the story may progress if a Kenneteer dies or gets disappeared or whatever. Like, I think we'll talk
Mm.
on that more in Verona's segment because I think that's the one that feels the most real in that sense. But God, it's really scary.
Yeah, you're right. There's this small part of yourself you can't switch off that's like, is some of this foreshadowing?
Yeah, is this
Like
doing double
Walbo,
duty here?
yeah,
Yeah.
Walbo's tricked us with some of that in the past. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
little party, and I mean that's fantastic because it means, like at the very least, these, as you said, these letters exist to really make us feel the stakes of this upcoming conflict, and it's designed to like put a lot of emotional weight behind it. So if
Mm,
Walbo's managed to construct a scenario where a little part of us believes it, that just enhances that effect because there's a little part of me that's already panicking and playing out these scenarios in my head. Like,
mm,
I mean, I'm not going to lie, as a reader, there is a not so small part of me that would be like, oh, what if like Avery did die? Like, what would we do then? Um, like there's a sick part of me that actually would have interest in exploring that, that direction for any of the Kenneteers.
mm. Yeah, it's very worrying. So there's a line in Avery's note to her family that I want to pull out where she's convincing them to run, and she says, "Ditch the job, bring Grumble, and leave." And that stood out to me because, like, it doesn't say bring Sheridan, it doesn't say bring, you know, uh, Kerry. It says bring Grumble, which to me lends credence to the idea that Grumble is going to a home that we were talking about. Because, like, if he still lived with them, you wouldn't need to say this, right? Would you? I don't know.
That's a good pick. I like that. Yeah, that really tracks to me. I thought he might just be sick, but that tracks with the taking him to a home thing a lot better.
Mm. All
I
right.
think
Well, we'll see, I
I
guess.
reckon you've convinced me a bit. Yeah.
Hey,
Um.
finally. Now we just have to get to the convince you on the Sylvia as a practitioner one.
Good luck. Um. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Avery's letters are just so heartbreakingly personal. Like to go with these first, I think is just like Warbo very much
Mm,
setting the tone for the other two of like, oh yeah, I'm here to hurt you.
yeah.
Um, like the one of the parts that really got to me is the part where she finally starts talking about like what she likes about every member of her family.
Mm,
Like these might be the first nice words we've heard about Kerry in the entire
mm,
fucking
mm,
story.
yeah.
Um, and Avery has this tendency to focus on the bad of her life a bit
Yeah.
and like the bad of her relationships and with her family. So seeing her, even in this context, do the opposite and be like, "This is what I like about you, Kerry. This is what I like about you, Sheridan." Um, it just
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
really hits you. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like yeah, like as we said, the concept for this extra material, like even if you know that they're not necessarily going to be needed, we're essentially seeing the Kenneteers' final words.
Yes. It's
Um,
pretty rough, isn't
yeah,
it?
so it's like we get to go through like 80% of the emotions of one of them dying and seeing the aftermath without it actually having to happen. It's
Yeah, it's very
amazing.
sneaky by Wildbow. Yeah.
Actually,
So
I say
next,
80%, but I'm just thinking, yeah, if one of them actually dies, it's
yeah,
probably gonna be more than that.
more than, yeah.
Or less than that, yeah.
Less than that, yeah. So yeah, next is Verona, who leaves information for Jeremy. Importantly, she doesn't tell her mum about the practice. I guess because she doesn't need to. Uh, but she does leave some notes for Jeremy to help him get up to speed on practitionering if she dies.
Yeah. I guess before we get into this thing proper, we should call out like there's like artwork heading for each Kenneteer's letters.
Mm,
And I really wanted to call these out, not because, well, not just because they're fucking beautiful, like they're
mm,
really
mm.
nice pictures.
They do look very
Um,
nice.
each one actually like sells the vibe of the letter really, really well. Like they're not just random images. Like Avery's header is all like these connection blockers and the like diagrams connecting them to their family, which of course her letter was all about like connecting to her family. Um, Verona's is like a picture of the diagrams they put on their body and like explanations of what the diagrams do and how the practice works. And that's what a huge chunk of her letter is. And then to jump ahead a bit, like Lucy's is a picture of her getting ready and then a checklist of like what she needs to do. And of course, her letter deals the most with like making sure the job gets done.
Mm,
Um, so just like a really cool little detail on like not only did Wildbow make cool art, but he managed to, have relevance.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it very much sets the scene for each one, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, Verona's letter to me feels the most likely to be Wabo gently seeding the idea of what would happen if Verona dies. Like, if we got to, imagine in 3 years we're reading the final chapter of Pale, and Verona has died, and Jeremy's now the new Kenneteer, and Verona has kind of become a semi-stable Echo. Maybe Jeremy's familiar, maybe not, whatever. But like,
no, it's got to be Lucy's familiar.
yeah, totally. But regardless, looking back to the first to Verona's arc over this story, seeing all the discussion about her becoming another, seeing, remember how we were talking about how we thought that her dad might have actually become some kind of Echo-esque thing at one point? Like,
yeah.
I can just see all of those things becoming so on point in retrospect if this is where Verona's arc goes, and I find that very terrifying.
Especially because she's finally found some equilibrium. Like, it's that perfect story moment. I mean,
yeah, and like, we can't really see how the story might progress if she goes off with her mum, but I can see how the story progress if she dies. Like, it's
because
worrying.
I can't remember if it was on the podcast or just privately, but I do remember the two of us talked a bunch about, like, when she left, we sort of had these discussions about, like, what would the story look like if she just didn't come back? Like, and she only, she appeared for a bit of the finale, but what if this did become a Verona-less story? It was something we talked about. And maybe that's part of it. Like, it's an idea that has been seeded in our heads by Arc 10, effectively excluding her. So that could have been our soft lead in to losing her, I suppose. I don't know. Like, it doesn't feel like a surefire thing or anything, but like, you're right. I could see it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I hope not. Maybe the fact that we've talked about it on the podcast will mean that Wabo has to do something different.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, our predictions haven't been wrong because we're bad at it. It's because
No. There's a big conspiracy going on here.
Yeah, I mean, especially like because Verona's note is half about the practice in a really cool way, because it's like we get this neat little, like, just TLDR on how Verona's feeling about the practice at the moment. But the majority of her note really is like how to take care of the other two, like her whole thing here. And we talked about it last chapter. It kind of feels like her main purpose in life right now is to take care of the other two. Like, that's what she sees herself as doing. And she's always been the one who didn't quite know what her mission or what her place was. And she's starting to settle on actually having a mission of taking care of these two. And that's really heartwarming. Except now you've planted this idea in my head that it's all leading up to her dying. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's very terrifying. So then, of course, we round out with Lucy's note. She leaves a note for Jazz, warning her of the dangers to come and of the justices to be delivered.
Yeah, and the first thing I want to call out here is Zed has apparently agreed to tell her mum some extra stuff if she can't, which is, like, from everything we've heard about the responsibility you take on awakening innocence and stuff, like,
Yeah.
props to Zed for, I mean, agreeing to do that is huge. Like, I don't know how much he's going to I'll make her aware or whatever. Maybe he's just going to talk about some general stuff, but still, like, feels like a risk.
Yeah, definitely does, for sure. So another mark for Zed.
Yeah.
I think this note is a perfect encapsulation of Lucy as a character, right? Like, she is leaving a note to the loved ones in her life as she discusses the decisions she is making that will cause her to not be able to see them again. And yet there's no world in which she will allow herself to not make those decisions, because that means people get away with their misdeeds. she just can't accept it. It's such a perfect encapsulation of Lucy.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's true of all the notes. But this is the one that, yeah, I think Lucy was so early on the one we ascribed like these motifs of like justice and
Mm,
like being focused on the mission.
mm.
So yeah, it adds up so well. Not that the letter's heartless. I mean, there is a lot of stuff to her mum here about like how much she loves her and
Oh
she had a
yeah.
good life and all that. But the big through line that really stands out is like she's setting up contingencies and stuff so that justice will still be served for certain definitions of justice,
Mm,
regardless of what happens to her and the others.
mm. Yeah. Shall we also touch on Samaniego is mentioned a bit here. Lucy basically calls out to her mum, "Hey, if everything's fucked, call this guy to come in and basically burn down the town."
Yeah, go nuclear. Like this is the nuclear option.
Yeah, and I think there's no chance in hell that Lucy will die here, so it won't be like that. But perhaps there's a way for this to be while both seeding the idea of like what would it be like if Samaniego came to town, obviously without Lucy dying first, so that we can kind of deal with that and not have it come out of the blue. I suppose
Yeah.
could be
Well, because that's a thread. Like we haven't seen the dealing with the witch hunters
Raph's
since
murder.
Raph died.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it was set up as like we're going to have to deal with this,
Mm,
and as far as like either we missed it or it hasn't happened yet.
mm,
So that's still a thread that needs to be dealt with, even if it's as simple as Guillermo told them it's cool, bro. Um,
mm.
I got one of your guys killed, but that was my plan, so we're good. That probably wouldn't make them go away. But yeah, I mean, we got to talk about like the thing that really made me lose, or that made Lucy lose me a bit here,
Mm-hmm.
is the plan is essentially okay, get all the witch hunters to come to town, and they're just gonna fuck it right to hell.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "What before you do this, get Zed, and Zed will get like our friends out
Yeah,
first."
yeah,
But then she specifically says, and then wait, the witch hunters can fuck up the culprits and the ambiguous ones.
yeah.
And it's where you hit the ambiguous ones for me that I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, like,
Yeah,
do you see the problem here?
yeah. It's a bit it's a bit blind justice.
Yeah, a little bit. Like it's very some of the problematic like eye for an eye sort of justice ideals Lucy's had at various points in the story where like she would rather this fucking war happen with the witch hunters and some innocents get hurt than the guilty people not being punished.
Mm.
And I don't know if I agree with that so much. Like if the cost of punishing them or yeah, is if the cost of punishing them is to hurt more people, I'm not sure it's worth it. You could argue it's also the cost of stopping them, which is
Mm.
probably an easier sell for me, but still.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, we don't have to see that. We'll see, I guess. But that's the end of the chapters. Before we wrap up, we've got some other stuff to discuss. Starting with some Pale predictions left by the community in our Pale Predictor form. Elliot, do you want to pull out your Pale prediction first?
Yeah, sure. I've got a prediction from my tallest. I'm not sure my
Your
tallest
tallest
what?
what? Yeah.
Yeah, just my tallest.
All right.
Who says the reason moving in with Jasmine was an available option is because the alternative was leaving Kennet, and Verona is magically tied to Kennet.
Mm.
And I mean, this is the other verse. I think it's like that's not the whole story. We already talked about the whole magic exaggerating things stuff, but like I think this was a factor in that we probably didn't call out. But I think my tallest is probably right that like karmically the idea of her staying at Jasmine's maybe got a little boost by her refusing any situation that didn't involve her staying in Kennet, and that one being the only one.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that. I like
So
it.
yeah, it feels like one of those things that would have just made that path a little bit easier for Verona to end up on, because karma would have been on her side.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Love it. I don't know if it's the kind of prediction which will ever get like confirmed in the story, but it's
No,
one that we can just kind of headcanon and be like, yeah, cool.
yeah, it seemed like a point worth bringing up because I don't think we thought of it.
Yeah, love it. I pulled out a prediction from Beleg Tal, who talks about how their prediction is that the culprits aren't claiming the furs for themselves, but instead to deny the furs to somebody else, which explains why they're not worried that the furs have been stolen per se, if they know that the person who stole the furs was the Kenneteers and not the person they're trying to deny the furs to.
Interesting.
So if Mariska is behind it, this murder stuff, the likely extension of this is that she's aiming to prevent Guilherme from taking the furs and the Carmine throne. Yeah, I like this theory. I think it, again, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I don't think it 100% explains everything, but I think it is a good explanation that ties together a few things. The culprit's not really escalating since they lost the furs, obviously is weird, and this potentially explains it, while also explaining my sinking sensation of Guilherme not necessarily being trustworthy. So I like a few things about this. I think there's probably a bit more to explore with it, but I like it.
Yeah, you're right, because it would explain why, like, if Marissa had picked that the Kenneteers don't want to give it to John, then she wouldn't be worried that they have it. So that tracks, because John would be the obvious other candidate that they need to keep them away from. Um, yeah, you're right. This feels like a little piece of the puzzle clicking together. I can totally buy this.
Mm. All right, we'll see if these predictions are validated.
Yeah,
Of course, it's also time for us to revisit answers to our discussion question. We were talking about Kennet and redefining roles and the new roles that others and practitioners might play. The question was, where do the witch hunters fit into that? And we got a few different answers talking about a bunch of different things. Some of
yeah,
them I've kind of grouped up by rough, areas. So one common role that people mention the witch hunters might play, Duronem was the first one I sort of bring this up, but basically being kind of advocates for the innocents.
yeah.
Practitioners are kind of meant to be this, but are obviously set apart much more than witch hunters are. So witch hunters could be more of a strong kind of rep for the innocent.
Yeah, well, because witch hunters are effectively just aware that have
Yes.
weaponized themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
That's probably something we haven't really discussed. Is like, obviously we talked so much about the aware and the way Bristow was exploiting them. Um, the witch hunters are basically just aware who have managed to support themselves, and they're doing that through becoming mercenaries. But
Mm.
um, I like this as like, yeah, maybe them advocating for the aware as well as the innocence, like, but being closer to humanity than practitioners definitely feels relevant.
Yeah. Um, we had a few other users who mentioned similar things. So, for example, Bisexual Punch Party touched on this and kind of acknowledged like the way the witch hunters are structured right now. They need some revamping. They are not really set up to be a positive force. E.g., they should have maybe mandated therapy for their witch hunter networks. T-Sar Watt also touched
Well,
on this.
sorry, mandated
Hmm.
therapy applies to a lot of the
Well, yeah,
practitioners,
sure.
but
Every
even the
practitioner or
others.
other. Yeah, you're right.
Just
Um,
let's just do mandatory therapy, like full stop, no qualifiers needed.
T-Star Watt also mentioned something similar and kind of touched on an interesting idea that like the witch hunters are probably something that's kind of a self-correcting force balanced out by the universe. So they suspect that, let's say all the witch hunters were wiped out, theoretically they could come back. Like it's a system that would propagate. There always being some witch hunters. So whatever role they end up taking will kind of be a balancing one, almost invariably. I mean, everything in this universe kind of is a balancing act, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
just an interesting point to note.
Well, I like this as a like, because the practitioners exist to, well, in theory, according to the Seal of Solomon, the role of practitioners was meant to be kind of protecting the innocents and like
Yeah,
handling those affairs that involve humans and interactions with others. And I think it's fair to say that the practitioners aren't living up to that. They're often exploiting people and
yeah,
others and
yeah,
like creating others. Like, we saw Charles created that revenant sort of through his actions, even if it was on accident. It's like, so the witch hunters propping up are almost this natural counterbalance because the practitioners aren't doing their job, so the witch hunters are sort of this grassroots effort that springs up to do the job that the practitioners are not doing.
yeah. This was something that a user called Ripper 1337 mentioned. Like,
Yeah,
witch hunters could kind of be a police force, to hunt down rogue practitioners or others that have that refuse to play by the new rules. And then there's a bit of back and forth in the comments there. But basically, the idea of like, hey, wait, isn't that what practitioners are meant to be for? And that's kind of gotten so warped over time that witch hunters, like witch hunters maybe shouldn't even exist in an ideal system because practitioners wouldn't be as
exactly.
kind of, exactly.
There's something that popped up because that job actually wasn't being done.
Yes, exactly right. Beard of Valor puts a spin on this that I also really like. Also talking about kind of witch hunters as a police force, but like mentioning it as an idea of like, in an ideal world, they could work alongside or against sometimes practitioners, where practitioners are like the kind of internal review team, while witch hunters are like the external review team outside the system. Sometimes you need people outside the system for problems. Sometimes you need people inside the system, and I think that as a kind of balance makes a lot of sense to me. The witch hunters are the people who watch the watchmen, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Although that sort of thinking always then ends me up back at, but who's watching the Watchmen of the Watchmen? Like
yeah, sure.
Because
There was
Meiji House sort of brings that up. With like, there's room for the witch hunters to be good, but at the moment they're like, Raph was this kind of nice guy, but the witch hunters, if anything, reinforced this mission in him of killing practitioners and others, and that they're all bad intrinsically, and obviously that's problematic.
Yeah. There was a user, Grundux91, who also kind of talked about a similar thing of like, actually the real problem here is kind of indiscerningly applying labels, right? Like Raph was kind of a good dude, we saw that, but he was set up with the mission of kill practitioners and others, and it's the labels that caused the problem in that situation, the refusal to like see the identity of the individual rather than the label holistically. And so they actually don't specifically answer what the role of a witch hunter should be in this, but kind of challenged our question a bit, which I liked. Of isn't actually changing the specific roles, or shouldn't be about changing the specific roles, but about breaking down the roles, or at least strengthening the idea of seeing beyond just the role or label that is applied to somebody. I really like that one.
That's a really good point. Like, should we not be thinking about these things in terms of this has to be a practitioner or this has to be, like that fuck with the labels. It's a good idea.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of really good responses, a lot of really interesting ones. So definitely go and check out those threads and see what everyone was saying, because I think there was some great stuff in there.
Yeah. And speaking of, it's time to do our next discussion question, which we will take answers for in a fortnight. But this fortnight, we're asking, what's your opinion of Sylvia now that we've spent some more time with her? Is she a good mum, or can she be?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because our opinions on Sylvia, we barely knew her at all to start with, and then we finally started to get a bit of her side of the story, I guess. Not a full justification, but an interesting exploration. And so I'm interested to hear how people's opinions of her have shifted over time.
Yeah, because I've become quite forgiving of her, and I think there's probably a lot of other people out there who aren't as forgiving. So it'll be interesting to sort of see where those people are, or if there are other people who can do a better job than me of explaining why they're more sympathetic to her now.
Yeah. So yeah, leave your answers to that in the discussion threads that you'll find linked in the show notes down below.
Yep, you can also check out our Twitter at MediaMD Podcast. Just search for Power Reflections. That's where you can find the live reads, hopefully announcements about the episodes being late, all sorts of stuff. Again, sorry about
that. Yes. Hey, why not also head on over to doofmedia.com, where you can find all the other great shows on the Doof Media Network, like Pace, which is releasing its final episode this Wednesday. And as we alluded to, there's a special big announcement in it, and it's in the first 3 minutes, so you don't even have to listen to the whole thing, but you should, because it's quite a good episode, I think.
It was very fun to play. I can't wait to listen to it. And a very fun announcement right at the start there. So, if you like that announcement, if you like this show, you want to keep supporting Doof and seeing more of our stuff, head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media. You get rewards too. There's extra shows and stuff, so check it out, please. We are entirely funded by our patrons.
Yes, and speaking of being entirely funded by patrons, of course, while you're on Patreon, you can find Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. He is the author that creates all these horrifying letters of 13-year-old children having to say goodbye to their families. And if you like that kind of thing, like the sick bastards that you all are, why not go and give him some money?
Yeah. So on that note, we'll see you next week for both some more content with Malia and Jenny, and also
Mm-hmm.
discussion of the next two chapters.
Hell yeah. See you there.